A diplomatic standoff is unfolding between Washington and West Africa, and it's escalating fast. Burkina Faso has taken the extraordinary step of banning U.S. citizens from entering the country, firing back after being placed on America's expanded travel blacklist. This isn't just about visas, it's about sovereignty, power, and a shifting global balance that could redefine U.S.-Africa relations in 2026 and beyond. A sudden diplomatic escalation. Burkina Faso's decision to ban U.S. citizens from entering its territory marks one of the boldest diplomatic retaliations in recent years between Washington and West Africa. The move came swiftly after the United States expanded its travel restrictions to include Burkina Faso nationals under a broader immigration crackdown ordered by President Donald Trump. Within days, Burkina Faso invoked what it called the principle of reciprocity, announcing equivalent visa measures against Americans. The announcement was not framed as an emotional reaction, but as a sovereign response. Officials in Ouagadougou emphasized that if Burkinabe citizens were deemed ineligible for entry into the United States, then American nationals should expect similar treatment in Burkina Faso. The decision signaled a shift in tone. African states traditionally affected by U.S. travel bans have often protested diplomatically, but rarely have they imposed symmetrical restrictions with such clarity and immediacy. The U.S. travel ban expansion, the U.S. decision that triggered this backlash, expanded full entry restrictions to additional countries, including Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. According to U.S. officials, the move was grounded in national security concerns. The White House cited deficiencies in screening and vetting procedures, inadequate information sharing, high visa overstay rates, and in some cases, refusal to accept deported nationals. The policy was framed as a security measure designed to prevent entry of individuals about whom U.S. authorities lack sufficient information to assess the risks they pose. The administration also noted that some of the listed countries have a significant terrorist presence, referencing persistent attacks by armed groups in parts of the Sahel region. For many in West Africa, however, the ban was interpreted as collective punishment rather than targeted security policy. Burkina Faso, already grappling with violent insurgency and political instability, viewed the measure as stigmatizing its citizens on the basis of nationality alone. Mali and Niger joined the response. Burkina Faso did not act alone. Mali and Niger, both governed by military juntas following coups in recent years, announced similar retaliatory measures. Mali's foreign ministry declared that it would apply the same conditions and requirements to U.S. nationals as those imposed on Malian citizens. Niger also imposed restrictions on American travelers, citing the need for sovereign equality and fairness. The coordinated reaction reflects growing solidarity among the three Sahel states. In 2023, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formed a new regional bloc after distancing themselves from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. Their alliance has focused on mutual security cooperation and redefining foreign partnerships, particularly as relations with Western governments have deteriorated. By responding collectively, the three governments demonstrated a unified front. The message was clear. Policies targeting one of them would likely be met with coordinated countermeasures. The Sahel's security crisis. The U.S. travel restrictions did not emerge in a vacuum. Burkina Faso and its neighbors have endured years of escalating violence linked to armed groups associated with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Large portions of territory have experienced instability, and millions of civilians have been displaced. Military governments in the region came to power partly on promises to restore security and reclaim territory from insurgents. Washington has cited this security environment as part of its justification for tightening travel controls. The argument centers on insufficient documentation systems and limited intelligence sharing capacity in conflict-affected states. Yet leaders in Ouagadougou and Bamako argue that their nations are being penalized precisely when they are fighting terrorism on their own soil. They contend that instead of cooperation, they have received restrictions that limit mobility for students, professionals, and families with ties to the United States. The principle of reciprocity. At the heart of Burkina Faso's response is a long-standing diplomatic norm: reciprocity. In international relations, visa policies often operate on mutual treatment. If one country imposes strict requirements or bans, the other may respond in kind. Burkina Faso's foreign minister described the new visa rules for Americans as equivalent measures. The language signaled that the move was not intended to escalate tensions further, but to mirror U.S. policy precisely. The government framed its action as necessary to defend national dignity and sovereign equality. This emphasis on reciprocity also plays well domestically. In a political climate where anti-Western sentiment has grown, standing firm against perceived external pressure can strengthen a government's legitimacy at home. Strained relations with the West. The visa dispute is part of a broader cooling of relations between the United States and the military-led governments of the Sahel. Following coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, Western nations suspended certain forms of cooperation and imposed diplomatic pressure to restore civilian rule. In response, these governments have pivoted away from traditional Western partnerships. They have strengthened ties with Russia and sought alternative security arrangements. French troops have withdrawn from several Sahel countries, marking a dramatic shift in regional geopolitics. The travel bans deepen this divide. What might once have been handled through quiet diplomatic channels has now become a public standoff. Each side frames its decision as justified, leaving little room for compromise in the short term. Impact on citizens and travelers. While the dispute is political, ordinary citizens bear the immediate consequences. Burkinabe nationals hoping to study, work, or reunite with family in the United States now face heightened barriers. Similarly, American business people, aid workers, and travelers must navigate new restrictions to enter Burkina Faso. Humanitarian organizations could feel indirect effects. The Sahel hosts numerous international aid operations responding to displacement and food insecurity. If diplomatic friction disrupts visa processes or travel permissions, project implementation may slow. There are also implications for regional events. The United States is set to co-host major international sporting events in the coming years. Although U.S. officials have indicated that athletes will be allowed entry, questions remain about spectators from blacklisted nations. A broader pattern. Across Africa, Burkina Faso's move reflects a wider reality. A significant portion of countries under U.S. travel restrictions are African. Of the nearly 40 nations facing full or partial entry limits, more than half are on the continent. Critics argue that this pattern reinforces perceptions that Africa is disproportionately targeted. Supporters of the policy counter that the restrictions are based on measurable criteria, such as documentation standards and cooperation on deportations. Regardless of perspective, the optics are powerful. When multiple African nations appear on a U.S. blacklist simultaneously, diplomatic sensitivity increases. Retaliatory measures, once rare, become more politically viable. Domestic politics and symbolism. For the military government in Burkina Faso, the travel ban on U.S. citizens carries symbolic weight. Since seizing power, the junta has sought to project strength and independence. Challenging Washington publicly reinforces that narrative. The decision also taps into broader frustrations about migration policy. African leaders have long criticized what they see as double standards in global mobility, where citizens of wealthier nations travel freely while Africans face stringent visa regimes. By banning U.S. citizens, Burkina Faso flips that dynamic, even if temporarily. The action may not significantly reduce American travel, given that tourism flows between the two countries are limited, but the symbolism resonates. What comes next? Whether the standoff escalates or cools will depend on diplomatic engagement in the months ahead. Travel bans are often easier to announce than to unwind. Each government must balance security concerns, domestic politics, and international reputation. If dialogue resumes, both sides could explore technical cooperation to address U.S. concerns about vetting and information sharing. Alternatively, entrenched positions could harden, further isolating Sahel states from Western partners. For now, Burkina Faso stands at the forefront of an unusual diplomatic confrontation. By leading Africa in imposing a reciprocal travel ban on the United States, it has transformed what began as a unilateral immigration policy into a test of sovereignty and geopolitical alignment. The consequences will extend beyond visas, shaping how Washington and the Sahel engage in an era defined by shifting alliances and contested security priorities. Will this standoff cool down through negotiations, or is it the start of a deeper geopolitical split in the Sahel? The answer could reshape travel, security cooperation, and global alliances. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay informed on the stories shaping our world.